looks that there is a connection between field activities, harvesting hay, harvesting grain now, and then we still will have a corn harvest quite soon. So it means that there is a risk that the field is contaminated, the harvest is contaminated, the green feed could be contaminated easily.
Hello, welcome to Meet the Expert, the podcast series on swine health management in practice, brought to you by Boehringer Ingelheim. My name is Peter Best. This episode of Meet the Expert continues our conversation with Dr. Tomasz Trela, the veterinarian based at the Vienna Regional Centre of Boehringer Ingelheim as technical manager in the swine sector for the region of Central and Eastern Europe. We're talking to Dr. Trela about practical aspects of African swine fever at farm level. In an earlier podcast, Dr. Trela, we spoke about risk factors for bringing in the ASF virus. It could be carried in by foxes and rodents, for example, but also by a large number of other possible vectors.
Yeah.
Where do we start with our precautions to keep out the virus if we find ourselves operating in an ASF positive environment?
I think first of all, the first barrier is a solid fence which is going around the farm area, and the solid, it's also regulated in many countries by the veterinary regulation, how high it should be. It should be at least 2 meters high. It should be half a meter deep in the ground. If you have a fence, you have a gate in the fence. You have to manage this gate. A gate which is open day and night will not protect your farm from foxes, which can jump from outside into the farm area. So it means you need the infrastructure, but it is also very important that the people have to operate and to use this infrastructure in the correct way. I already mentioned that we have today very good possibility to control rodents and flies. We only must implement them correctly. One point which may be difficult to control are the birds. And we see the birds which are coming to the farm, but at least I can say that probably the risk of getting the virus with the birds is rather limited, and as far as I know, there was no evidence for this type of carrier or fomite. But nevertheless, again, if you keep the farm area clean, if you keep the whole farm area and the inside sectors also separated by proper and solid fences, then you are significantly reducing the risk of getting the virus to your pigs.
Now, a good fence would keep wild boar out, of course, but you've reminded me in our first conversation that the ASF virus is known to be carried and spread by populations of wild boar. And in your story about the cleaning of vehicles reminded us that these wild boars could be knocked down in the road and contaminate a vehicle. Believe also that the contamination of field crops is something that we should take into account.
Absolutely, yes. So first of all, I think we observe quite constantly the increasing number of outbreaks during the summer period.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually now the case in Poland, where we have almost every day a report about new outbreak in areas which are mostly populated by small farms, small pig farmers, and this looks that there is a connection between field activities, harvesting hay, harvesting grain now, and then we still will have a corn harvest quite soon. So it means that there is a risk that the field is contaminated, the harvest is contaminated, the green feed could be contaminated easily, the straw could be contaminated easily, and again we have already experienced with the situation that the dead boar was the cadaver was just on the field, and the large tractor was just passing through this cadaver, so crushing the bones, crushing the remainings of the body, contaminating this machinery, and then a few hours later or a short time later, this truck or this tractor or harvester was parking in the middle of the court of the farm. So we have even picture of this. So it means there is a high risk. So keep away this machinery from the area which is used, for instance, for communication to entering the pig buildings. Yeah.
But if the feed itself were to be the carrier, Dr. Trela, is there any way we have to make sure that the feed is biosecure?
I think that's also a very good question, and this is a very important question. Many people were dealing during the last 2 years. I think there is a great job done by American colleagues. A lot of research showing that yes, African swine fever virus could be carried by feed or feed components under, let's say, real life condition. Even this virus can stay infectious for 40 days. So it means now there is a lot of work ongoing about how to mitigate the virus in feed, how to destroy the virus which can be in feed effectively. So there are already some feed additives which seems to be quite effective. Nevertheless, I think the first point is you have to know where the feed is coming from. So if you are using a grass in the backyards, and you know that the area around is frequented by infected wild boars, then you cannot use the green grass, or you cannot use the straw. Or you have to store the straw for 90 days, so 3 months or even longer, to ensure that the virus is not infectious, or that there is no virus anymore in this straw. You have to know the source of your feed, which is, of course, extremely difficult. Feed is a commodity going around the world. And I think, especially the last 2 years, the American researchers did a great job to try to look closer at this aspect. And yes, we have to consider feed as also as a possible risk, and we have to implement the proper steps, for instance, to adopt biosecurity procedures at the feed mills to the new situation, because they are in the new situation, and there are cases that we found ASF virus in the feed mill in some countries. So the risk is real.
Do you know if there's any particular type of feed other than the green feed you mentioned? Is there any particular type of feed considered a particular risk?
I think, again, I have to refer to the work of American colleagues and Kansas State University group, Scott D, and they show, for instance, the soya bean as a feed component could be a kind of milieu where the virus can stay easily infectious for a longer time. So again, we have to refer to the literature, and actually a number of feed components or compounded feed can be quite a good environment for the virus, and the virus can stay infectious for a longer time, for a few weeks. So it means, again, biosecurity rules at the feed mill. Know the supplier of your feed, apply biosecurity rules for the feed storage, keep the feed bins closed, keep the birds away, keep the rodents away, keep the flies away, keep the people away. If necessary, manage the feed trucks properly, keep them clean, be sure about even the routes The feed trucks are traveling to maybe even design the routes in the way to avoid hotspots, for instance, areas where we know there's a lot of ASF among wild boars. So it's also a totally new challenge for the feed industry, I would say.
Sure. But when you mentioned the summertime increase in outbreaks on pig farms, you make me think that, a lot of people are out and about enjoying the countryside as visitors or as hunters, but also, of course, they could be the families of the farm workers and so on in rural areas where wild boar are present. So all of these are risk factors I can recognize because of the wild boar. I'm less certain, rather, how one reacts to that. If you've got a farm or you're a veterinary surgeon advising a farm, what can you possibly do to stop people going on fields and then inadvertently bringing the virus back with them?
Well, it's a quite difficult question, and I think it's quite complex. So first of all, let's see what's happened in Belgium. So the virus was found in September 2018, and basically now the country is very close to get the ASF free status again after very heavy fight with the wild boars or with the infection within the wild boar population. And I think also we have to learn from every case, from every country. And I think the Belgium authorities, the Belgium professional people, veterinarians, veterinary administration, local administration, they did a great job. And they basically, it looks that they are getting rid or got rid of the virus. But there was also based on education. The people who were visiting the area for recreation, for trekking, for walking through the forest, the hunters, this is a group which is very close to the virus actually, being in the fields, going for the hunting, being close to dead animals, having dead animals, shot animals in their hands. Okay, so they are they are the first who can get in physical contact with the infected boar. So they have to know how to handle the boars. And meanwhile, in all those countries, we have a very clear regulation. So the veterinary administration, the local administration is also responsible to create this regulation and to follow up this regulation. I think we have already a lot of this information, but the people have to follow. I would say for the farm, what is important, if you are a hunter, then be very careful. So you have to be careful about absolutely changing the clothes, changing the equipment, don't bringing anything you are using for hunting to the farm. Yeah. Again, maybe your best friend is invited to you, but if your best friend is a hunter, you have to be very clear with him. You have to change everything. Don't bring me a wild boar sausage to my farm as a gift for the party, yeah, celebration. So we had all this situation in the real life. So really, you have to limit number of visitors. You have to ask yourself, is this person really necessary to visit my farm or not? Can we handle this issue in the remote way? So similar like vehicles, try to reduce the traffic of the people, traffic of the vehicles to the absolute necessarily minimum amount.
Let me pause for a moment to remind everyone that more information on this conversation, like articles, publications and videos, can be found on the website pers.com. At this point, Dr. Trela, may I just take a moment to remind our listeners we're in conversation with Dr. Tomasz Trela of Boehringer Ingelheim, based in Vienna, about practical measures to protect a swine farm against the virus of African swine fever. Thank you, as always, for joining us, and we appreciate your feedback. Dr. Trela, you mentioned about dead pigs being left outside, as you said. and we know that ASF kills pigs. It probably means there'll be a necropsy of those animals to determine why they died, but there's also the questioning with them of the disposal of dead pigs. Are there significant risks of spreading the virus arising from how we dispose of the carcasses and then from how necropsies are carried out?
Well, of course, there is a huge risk because we know that in blood or in organs of infected pigs, there is a huge amount of virus. Yeah, so it means any amount of blood or tissues which are spread around, of course, they create a very high risk of infection. However, we have to follow again local regulations. In many countries, necropsy on the farm is not allowed anymore. So you have to transport these dead animals in the proper way, in tightly closed containers to the professional site where the necropsy is done under veterinary supervision, having a proper infrastructure, including state-of-the-art or necessary disposal possibilities. Yes, this is a big deal. So this is a big risk. I would say also that first of all, on the farms, you have to ensure that all dead pigs or organs from those animals, regardless ASF or not, they must be disposed properly according to the local regulations. And you have to ensure, and this is a job for the farmer, that this material is immediately, as soon as possible, closed in the tight containers, and then in most of the countries, the disposal is done outside the farm by rendering company, will be picked up by rendering company. In some countries, there is a compostation, or you have a incinerator, so you can burn as a kind of oven, high temperature unit that you can burn dead pigs or the organs from dead pigs. That's another point. So again, we have to follow strictly local regulations, but the point is we have to do everything to ensure that this material, which may be highly infectious, which might contain a large amount of pathogen, will be strictly controlled, and we must ensure that this infection will be not spreading with this material.
Okay. But I'm going to give you the hypothetical situation. It probably does occur. You're on a farm and you're working on a farm and you're not aware of any particular problem, even in the area with ASF, certainly not on this farm. And then there's a dead pig. And you hadn't seen that the pig was ill before you found that it was dead. And now I'm the manager or owner operator of the farm, and I need to tell my workers what they must do if confronted by that dead pig. What is your advice? Because it seems to me here's a rich source of the virus. Whatever they do is likely to be wrong if they touch it, if they move it, or anything like that. So what do they do?
So first of all, I must once more underline that disposal or handling of dead animals is a part, or should be a part, of any biosecurity SOP. So it's not only for ASF, it should be a routine to have a procedure to handle disposal of dead animals, storage of dead animals, disposal of dead animals. So the point is that whatever we have ensure that any kind of pathogens which might be present in this dead body or organs, for instance, like placentas from abortions, that they must be removed in the very quickly way, in the very proper way, by specially trained people, and store under proper condition. It means closed container in a specially dedicated and separated areas. All equipment for handling this or storage of this material must be disinfected, And the people who are handling this area, they must be properly trained. So it means if we are talking especially about ISF, so the next step after this proper handling, transporting, storage is, of course, you have to look, you have to call your vet, you have to seek advice from your vet. The vet probably will come based on the information you will get, or he will find on the farm. He will make a decision about sampling or sending samples to the laboratory. But nevertheless, once more, for me, a very, very important: remove dead animals very quickly, keep them in the dedicated, separated areas under absolutely 100% closure. So not open containers, not dead animals in the front of buildings waiting to be removed on the next day. This is absolutely no go.
Gotcha. Your answer, makes me think I should ask you also about moving live pigs. Our biosecurity measures, that what they need to specify exactly about how we move pigs when we market them. And I'm thinking of contact with trucks and truck drivers, as you mentioned, but also there's that pig that manages to escape and run back into the farm. It seems to happen more often than not. What can we be doing with such things?
Yeah.
And also the loading chute. When you talk about cleaning of lorries, I should have asked you about things like the loading chute. How do we clean that?
Yeah, that's a good point, but I still must say something regarding dead pigs when you started to talk about trucks. But we have also trucks, rendering trucks, which are picking up dead pigs. And this is also a very important point when we are talking about biosecurity, also in respect of African swine fever. So first of all, we need an infrastructure which enable to load the rendering truck without entering the farm. So we need a special area where we can put our container with dead pigs or the organs of dead pigs in the way that the truck can load this material without entering our farm. So this is usually located in the most remote corner of the farm with a special fences around and also special team handling this. This is a very, very important. Back to your question, Peter. Yes, so we mentioned that we have the logistic zone, we have the buffer zone, and this is also the zone which is area where the pig trucks are moving. And one of the principles I mentioned already before is to avoid direct contact of the slaughterhouse trucks, for instance, trucks which are picking market animals to slaughterhouse, and the pig buildings. So we are using the loading charts. So we are using this loading base. It means the areas which are very well separated by fences and gates from other sectors, which are operated by special teams, which are not entering after the loading procedure back the production zone. And there are some points I think we have to always follow up. So first of all, avoid the lorries or the pig trucks to enter the inner production area. This is absolutely no go. Use these loading shots. Avoid. There's not only the truck, there is also a driver. Avoid any contact between the driver and the farm workers. The driver should stay inside the truck. And if there is a need for operation, then we have to either use our people or we have to control every movement of the driver who is operating, for instance, the loading ramps of the truck. Another point which is very important when we are talking about the loading chutes, pigs which enter the loading bay never go back to the farm. Absolutely no go. So once the pig was pushed or brought to the loading area, they never go back. The area must be surrounded by fences. It must be clean to disinfect. And also your question was how to disinfect. Of course, you need everywhere a concrete floors, easy to clean, easy to keep clean and tidy. And the direction of cleaning must always be from inside to the outside. So you need a slope. that all the liquid, all the droppings are going outside the loading area, not flowing back to the loading area. And the last but not least is it's very important to have a special team or special persons who are really familiar with loading procedure, and somebody who is also supervising the procedure. And here we shouldn't make any kind of exceptions.
Thank you, Dr. Trela. I regret that we should end it there. I want to thank you very much for these highly practical observations and very helpful observations. I'm sure our listeners will find them very valuable to them. So thank you to you. Thank you to our listeners for joining us in this Meet the Expert podcast brought to you by Boehringer Ingelheim. Stay tuned. More podcasts are on the way. But for the moment, thank you and goodbye. We want to remind you that more information on this conversation, like articles, publications and videos, can be found on the website pers.com.